and welcome to the Wandering Creators Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Coots, and joining me today is Raleigh-based fiber artist, Rebecca Robinson. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of your work, and you're one of the artists where I was just creeping around on Instagram and came across some of your work, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Who is this person? Can they be on my podcast?
Thanks so much. That means a lot.
Absolutely. I love your style of weaving, I guess, or is there another name for kind of what you do? Because it's not like the traditional style of weaving, I would say.
It's not. If I had to call it anything else, I would just call it abstract weaving. Very fringe heavy and
yes, all the textures.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. I love that style, I guess, of weaving where it's just like a combination of different textures and yarn and you're building I don't know how to describe it, like clumps almost of different features, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I almost sometimes want to I feel like my stuff gets more and more bulky the longer I'm weaving. So it's almost I want to call it soft sculpture at some point, but I don't know. Technically, it's weaving.
I like that. But yeah, it's I don't know. You're just building these beautiful abstract fiber art worlds, these little looms, and I don't know. It's truly amazing. It's one of my favorite things to look at, and is a style of weaving. It's actually one of the reasons why I attempted to learn to weave was because I wanted to eventually do that type of stuff. So not confident yet. Yeah, I dabbled in weaving for 2 months. and you made a single woven piece, and I was like, I did it, and I've not done it since.
I gotta keep going.
I've definitely, having spoken to several fiber artists lately, I'm like, I might have to get back into weaving. I started knitting again, so I feel like weaving is the next hobby to make it back around.
Yeah, you have all the materials you already need.
Exactly. I've got a little loom. I just, gotta work it into my hobby to-do list. So something that I really love about your work as well is that you're very heavily inspired by nature. And I think you can definitely see that in your work, especially with your color palettes and everything. And are you someone who do you take photos and then use those as reference photos, or is it kind of just something that you're out and about and you're like, oh my gosh, I love those colors, or that's a really pretty plant, I'm gonna work that color and maybe a little bit of that structure into my work?
Yeah, so I'm when it's not 100 degrees outside, I'm pretty much always outside. If I'm indoors for an entire day, God, I will be the most depressed person. I have to be outside, and we live in this awesome neighborhood now that has a walking trail through the woods.
Oh, nice.
It's just, we're surrounded by trees. I've been really heavily into gardening this year, and so it's just kind of my life, my world. But then I also do, I'll be scrolling through Pinterest at night or something and come across a cool photo of, something. Sometimes nature, sometimes not, but mostly nature color palettes. And I'll just I'll save it and I'll be like, ooh, in case I'm not feeling inspired one day, I will come here and this will inspire me.
Nice. Pinterest is a glorious and dangerous place. You could get lost on there for hours.
For sure.
Did you jump right into fiber art, or did you start with needlework or knitting first, or how did you get into weaving, I guess?
So I can only weave. I recently started dabbling into needle felting, but I cannot knit. I cannot crochet. I've never tried. One day I'll try when I have more time, but I've always been an artsy person. I went to school for art, but I was the worst person in my in every class at everything. Like I cannot draw to save my life. I could not make like a mug on like the potter's wheel. I almost like my teacher finally ended up giving me a C, but she's like, I don't even know if I can give you a C. So like my first grade in college was a C in ceramics. But yeah, I used to make like, so like I've always been making something. And I used to make like these, before I had kids, like these beaded floral bridal headbands. And they were cool. And but there were so, the beads were so little, and I'm like, I can't have this around when I have a baby. So everything just kind of went on hold when I had my first son, and he'll be 6 in September. And like, I did not pick up anything related to art again until after I had my daughter, and she's about to be 3. So there was a little bit of a hiatus there. So when I felt that urge, like, okay, I need to get, I need something creative again. I'm like, well, let me just hop on the internet and like look around and see what's out there that I haven't tried. And I was on, I think, Etsy, and just like, suggested for you or something like that. And I came across some like beautiful woven pieces, and it started out like seeing some just more traditional style woven pieces. And then as I started like going deeper, I started finding things that were different, things like I hadn't seen before. And I was like, I want to make that. I want.
Fell down the rabbit hole.
I never came out.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that you like saw, you were just like, you know what? This looks super cool. I'm going to give it a go. And then like ended up falling in love with it. Like I love that about people. Yeah. Just people. I'm like creative people who can do that. Like just pick something up and turn it into this thing that they love so much. It's a cool part of being, I don't know, I guess being creative or trying new things.
For sure.
And so today, what we wanted to do on the episode is something a little bit different than what we've done on other episodes, in that we want to talk about, we're calling it the anatomy of a piece. So the anatomy of an artwork. We're going to walk through as kind of process for when she's creating, and kind of learn at least what your process is and how that plays into creating your awesome, beautiful pieces of art. So I'm pumped to learn more about that.
All right.
So we kind of already mentioned this, but when you start working on a piece or you're out and about and you feel inspired, you will like save pictures and kind of like keep things in mind for later. And I know, like I kind of mentioned, like some people will sketch out their process and sketch out their work, but you typically like kind of just jump into it, right? Or do you lay out, I guess, like the different colors that you want to use in the piece before you get started, or what's that kind of first step for you?
Yes. So I'm not a planner. I used to think I was somehow, like just in life in general, but then after kids, I learned that I'm not at all in any aspect. But when I first started weaving, I like tried to sketch out designs, because the videos I found that I was like learning from initially, they were very like design and pattern heavy. And I quickly realized that that's the part I didn't like at all, just because my brain does not work like that. So kind of what my process is I as far as like materials, I buy anything I see that not anything I see, but I'll see, someone will post a new hand spun yarn, and, it just feels like it calls to me, and I'm like, buy
yes,
that.
Please.
So I have this humongous collection of yarn and fiber and ribbons and string. And so what I do when I want to start on a piece is I just I'll go up to my 3rd floor where all my stuff is, and I'll go to my yarn cabinets and just start pulling stuff. Like I'll just look at it and I'll be like, okay, what am I feeling today? and I'll pull like that initial color, and then I'll start like a pile on the floor. I'll like throw things down next to each other, and then, if something doesn't work, I'll throw it to the side until I have like, I don't know, maybe like 20 or so different kinds of yarn and fiber. And I'll be like, okay, this is what I'm going with here. This is what I'm going to put in my baskets. And, I might use some of this. I might not use some of this. This might go a completely different direction, which is usually what happens. But yeah, that's how I start.
I love that. Yeah, that's like the complete, it's just so interesting because I know everyone has like different processes for, how they plan or not plan or whatever. And I'm definitely a planner. I'll sketch out everything. I'll get the colors together and then like go forward. But so I find it so fascinating. Like, I love the way that you're able to just go in and be like, yes, like, I just imagine you like throwing like yarn over your shoulder into a pile as you like go through your collection.
That's pretty much how it goes.
Oh, I love it. I'm a little like, I don't know. I wish I could be more like that and less planning in my own ways, just because I feel like there's a freedom in that you maybe miss a little bit when you're trying to like plan everything out. But that's so interesting. I love that. And then, so once you've got your colors, do you, I guess if you could walk us through a little bit, because I'm now that I know the beginning part of your process, I'm curious, like, how do you start? Do you kind of just like let the piece speak to you and weave things in and create like the ties and the texture and everything just as like it comes to you?
Yeah. I mean, that's going to sound like very, very like hippie-ish, but yeah.
No, I love it. I love that so much.
Like, for when first you have to warp your loom, which are, your base for everything, like your vertical strings. Like if you were a painter, it would be your canvas. And then you have to, do a row horizontally of, a certain weaving technique that'll, hold everything together. And I start at the bottom. I know some weavers like start at the top or just start in random spots, but I always start at the bottom because fringe is what I love about weaving. And yeah, I just look and I just look at what I have and I start pulling, and sometimes like I'll hold something up and I'll be like, yes, that's it. Or I'm like, no. And that's, or if it's a no, then I'll pull like 5 other things. I'll be like, this, no, this, no, this, no. So it's just kind of, it builds itself sort of, if that
yeah. Putting the colors together. Do you, because I'm assuming there's like different types of techniques that you can use to like create the texture, like different knots or bows or things like that. How do you, I guess you mentioned kind of watching videos. Did you learn all that from watching videos as well? Or how did you teach yourself?
Yes. So I started with a course called, I think it's Welcome to Weaving by Lindsay at Hello Hydrangea. She's kind of like the guru of modern age weaving.
Okay. I'm taking notes.
And that's how I learned all of the basic everything, tools, materials, techniques of weaving, like you said, for the different types of knots and the different techniques. Yeah. So that's where I learned that's where my foundation was. And I went on to take a couple more for courses, which were like project courses, which would teach you like how to make the exact same thing that she's making. And that's when I realized I was frustrated with that part because I can't, my brain doesn't work with patterns and counting numbers and keeping track of things. Like, So that's when I quickly learned, okay, I have to try something a little bit different or else I don't even like this.
Yeah, a little more abstract.
Yeah.
What would, well, I guess I have a few questions. What is your favorite like style, I guess, of knot, or favorite thing that you can create in your pieces?
Yeah, so the technique I use the most is called looped raya. And it's like, okay, so when you look at a traditional wall hanging, you know the fringe that hangs down, it's just normally like plain white string. So it's like that, except there's like a loop in between. So there's like a string or a piece of yarn, and then you create this loop in between, and then there's the other side of it, or you can keep going with it. You can keep looping it and looping it and looping it. And that's what I honestly, my weavings are mostly made up of looped raya, just because I love the way it hangs and falls. And, you know, I'm very into like whimsical kind of enchanted looking things. And that's what gives me that kind of look that I like, is that looped raya technique.
I can kind of picture it in my head. In my head, I'm kind of picturing almost like scales almost of
like
yarn.
That. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Very cool. And listeners, I am going to include a couple pictures from Rebecca of her work. So you will get to see her beautiful wall hangings as well. So you can kind of picture what we're talking about as we're talking about it. When it comes to, like, do you feel like sometimes I want to say like, you have like the too much gene, or like, is it hard to like edit yourself? Do you want to just like put everything in a wall hanging, or again, is it, I don't know, it sounds like it's a really natural process for you, which is like, it's so amazing, but I'm just wondering if sometimes it's just like, at the end, you're like, oh, I went too hard on this one. Like I put too much yarn in this.
Yeah, I actually feel like that a lot. And when I was first finding my style, I guess, I would feel like that. And then I'd go to like post it on Instagram and I'm like, I wonder what other people are going to think of this. You know, I think it looks really cool, but like, I don't know if someone's going to want to hang this in their home, or, you know, because it's like a thing. It's not like just, you know, there's something you walk past. It's like there, because there's just so much. But I actually found that it seems like the more stuff I throw in, like, the more people are like, oh, that's so cool. So I'm like, look, other people like this too. So sometimes I feel like I'm just like barfing out anything that, you know, I think that looks cool. Like, and it's just like, you know, there's moss in there, there's sequins, there's, gosh, what else? Some dried floral. And I'm like, this is just like, is it too much? And I'm like, I don't care. I like it. I think it looks cool.
Even as you were like naming things, I'm like, that sounds so beautiful and probably looks like a freaking enchanted forest. Like, just love your stuff.
Every piece to look like. I grew up kind of like this Disney kid, and I kind of had rose-colored glasses all the time. And then like after I moved out of my parents' house, I was like hit with what reality actually is. So I grew up in this kind of like fantasy, like magical world, you know, and I think that's, you know, sometimes I wish I could unlearn all the adult stuff and just go back to it. So like while I'm weaving, that's kind of where it takes me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you're trying to kind of recapture that childhood. What do I want to say? The whimsy of childhood, I guess, of not knowing what it's like to have to adult.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I am right there with you. I think a lot of us, are like trying to get, I know for me, it was always like, I'm always trying to tap back into the creativity that I had when I was a kid, because I was so creative and I wrote so much, and now I'm like jaded.
I know.
You know, and you're just like, I got to get back to that
yes.
place.
Yes, agreed.
Back to the youthfulness.
Yeah.
I think you can definitely see that in your pieces though, because like they do have that whimsical vibe to them, and they're just very like airy and cottage core, and just yeah, I love them. I love your work.
Thank you so much.
What's something that you would say that you've learned about yourself since, like, through your entire creative journey? Because you said you went to school for art, and then you kind of stopped for a number of years when you had your kids, and then you found your way back to it. Like, through that entire process, were there a couple of kind of like life moments and things that you kind of learned about yourself?
I think once I found weaving and I got back into, tapped back into that artsy side and had a creative outlet again, I definitely learned that I need that. Like, it's almost like therapy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's when I feel my best, is when I'm creating. I have gained a lot of confidence. I think so. When I had both of my kids, I went through about a postpartum depression and anxiety, like really, really heavy. And I was just like, I was not happy with myself at all, with my, I just felt like I kind of lost myself. And I think a lot of new moms do. And I didn't even know who I was anymore. Like, I didn't know how to be a person, unattached from my children.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started weaving, I just felt like myself again. I felt like I was a person, and like, here I am. And this is what I'm giving something to the world. I mean, it's not like I'm not like doing anything profound, but I love making these, and people have been really kind, and if I try not to care about like what people will think of my work, but at the same time, it does feel really good when people like your work, and it boosts your confidence. So I think it really, helped me just get back to being myself.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's kind of, it makes me, I'm glad that it has like helped with confidence, because I know it can sometimes go the other way as well, where like you lose a little bit of confidence when you start making art, because you're like you said, you're a little worried about like what people are going to think, and that can be that can be overwhelming. But what advice would you have for artists who are maybe a little worried about putting their stuff out there because of what people will say?
Just don't. Just don't worry about it. Just, my husband and I always say, oh, there's somebody for everybody. Like, so like with your artwork too, like there's somebody for it. There's someone who's going to connect with it. I mean, there's so many people in this world, everybody's different. So no matter how crazy and, kooky or weird you think your stuff is, like, just throw it out there. And I honestly think, for me anyway, like the weirder it is, the more I like it. Because like in today's world, there's just like everything's been done. I feel, it's like hard to be creative anymore, like hard to have an original idea. So like if you do, just like throw it out there, and I'm telling you, the world will embrace it. You will find your people, and they will embrace it.
Yeah, someone will connect with that uniqueness, and then you'll find your tribe, find your people.
Yes.
Good advice. Very good advice.
Okay.
What are you? Well, I guess before I get to what you're working on, when it comes to the last part of your projects, how do you? I guess because you often use, people who weave often use like wooden dowels and stuff like that. Do you typically use wooden dowels, or do you use like branches and stuff like that for kind of your, what are those called even? The endings?
Yeah, I guess like just the piece of
hanging.
I don't know. I've never used a wooden dowel. I have always used, driftwood, branches, that kind of thing. I have a humongous collection. My family is like super supportive, and like my whole family is like super outdoorsy, and like my parents go to the mountains all the time, and like my dad, the first thing he does whenever they go somewhere is he likes to go down the river and find me some cool pieces of driftwood to bring back.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I just have so many. It like takes over a corner of my garage.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so cool too that your family is like so supportive and they're like, yes, we will collect wood for you.
Yeah, he's super into it.
Oh, that's awesome. And then what are the kind of like last steps that go into kind of like tying off the piece and calling it officially like finished?
Yeah, so like for me, once I look at something and I feel like it's done, then there's a certain technique you have to do to make it secure. There are a couple different techniques you can do, but what I do, it's called twining. And so I do a row of twining at the top just to hold all of that yarn and fiber in place. And it's just like tight knots, basically. Then the moment of truth is when you cut it off the loom, you cut your, initial warp strings that are those vertical strings, you cut them, and that's when your piece is like at its most fragile state. Like if you dropped it or like a kid came running by and ran off with it, like you would be in trouble because the whole thing would fall apart. So you have to, knot all of those warp strings on the top and bottom to hold it. And then you have to, or at least what I do, then I go find my driftwood. I'll take my piece down to the garage, down to my wood collection and hold up a bunch of different pieces. And it's like the same thing as when I'm pulling yarn. I'll be like, no, yes.
Nice.
And then there are a few different techniques you can use to, different types of knots to actually attach it to the driftwood or dowel. Then you're still not done. You have to then all of those strings you just cut and tied off, to really secure your piece, you have to weave them into the back. And that kind of completes the piece. And I kind of, a lot of people, it's known as the dark side of the loom. When you the back side of the piece. And some people dread, like other weavers I know, they dread flipping their beautiful piece over, and like all of these strings that and yarn and whatever they were using to weave with are just like sticking out all over the place. So what I do is, as I'm weaving, I weave the ends in, so that way I don't deal with that at the end. Because when I first started weaving, before I figured out that I should do that, I dreaded that part. Like, it was like doing homework or something and like a subject you don't want to do.
I love the dark side of the loom. That's the type of humor that I want from all the creatives out there. And as you were talking, I was like, I think that's where I messed up with mine. Like, I still have my first piece. It actually hangs on my door. So I must have done something okay, because it's not fallen apart yet in the last like 3 years. So I think I did okay, but I definitely like just knotted the strings on the end and then just like left them, because I was over it by then, and I was like, whatever, it's fringe. I was like, they're gonna stay, because I was like, I can't anymore. So it's like a half finished piece, I guess.
That's okay. I mean, and if it's yours, it's only for you,
Yeah, so I was like, good enough. It's the first one I did.
Yeah.
So, but as you were talking, I was like, yeah, I should have done that. Or I was like, oh yeah, that's what I did wrong on that one. It's good to know, though. No, if I ever get back into it, I've got a little bit of a reference now to to think about. So as we start to wrap up, what are you like currently working on? Do you have any new projects or like upcoming markets or workshops even, or anything you got going on?
So I really haven't done any markets. I've done like a couple like things here and there. Like I recently was part of this event that took over like an old historic house and had like an evening of like cocktails and dancing and music, and they took all the art down from the walls of like the old historic stuff and like put up a bunch of, you know, stuff with local artists. So I did something like that. But I just, with 2 young kids, like I just can't commit to like markets and stuff. What I am working on, and I hope to have done within the next month, I wanted to have it done in May, but that did not happen, is I'm working on an ebook with video tutorials.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so it'll kind of, and I think I'm going to call it The Art of Abstract Weaving, as long as there's no like copyright infringement on, to just share like my style of weaving and, you know, what I do from start to finish. And so that's my big thing right now. I also so in a former life, I used to be a web designer.
Oh, nice.
So I'm slowly moving over to my own website. I've been on Etsy forever. My site is there. And I'm going to be moving my pieces over there, like, you know, the ones that are available. So I'm working on that. And I have a couple, because I'm working on these other 2 big things right now, I'm not taking a lot of commissions, but I just took these 2 really awesome commissions that I'm super excited about. And they're bigger pieces too. And they're just very cool and different.
Those sound good.
Yeah, so that's what I'm working on.
You got a lot of cool things in the works. I'm excited for the ebook. That's going to be awesome.
Thanks. I'm excited too. I'm just hoping I can get it out. You know, I wish I could just stay up all night sometimes and just, you know, get it all done. But
slowly but surely. You'll get there. And so if people want to kind of follow along and keep track of like your ebook and when that's coming out, as well as I'm assuming you're going to be posting about some of your commission work and whatnot, where can folks find you?
Yeah, so I'm mainly on Instagram at Rebecca Fiber Art. And from there, I have a link to my Etsy page where my current work still is. And then I also have a link to my website where my ebook and video tutorials will be when I launch that.
Oh, awesome.
And that is RebeccaRobinsonFiberArt.com.
RebeccaRobinsonFiberArt.com. Nice. And listeners, I will include all Rebecca's information in the episode description. So it'll be super easy for you to just click on the link and it will take you to her pages. So I highly recommend checking them out. And if you are just looking for like a chill vibe, check out her Instagram, because it's just a nice place to like look at your work and kind of like go to another place. So
I love that. That makes me happy. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like so relaxing. There's something about it. I could just like scroll through and look at your fiber art and just be like, yeah, that's so nice. It's just a pleasant place.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough, like honestly. And Rebecca, I can't thank you enough for being on it. It's been wonderful learning more kind of about your process, and I find it so interesting, and I can't thank you enough for sharing a bit of your story and your knowledge with us today.
For sure. Thanks for asking me. This was fun.
Yay. Good. That's what we aim for. And listeners, thank you for tuning in today. If you have questions or comments for me or for any of my guests, including Rebecca, you can text or call us and leave a voicemail on our hotline, 252-419-6004. And we will include them in a future episode of the podcast. Again, that's 252-419-6004. Call or text us. And you can follow the podcast on Instagram at Wandering Creatives Pod. And of course, be sure to like, rate, and review the Wandering Creatives Podcast wherever you listen. Thanks for listening to the Wandering Creatives Podcast, a CEI media production. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us greatly. You can follow us on Instagram at Wandering Creatives Pod and on Facebook at Wandering Creatives Podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is in the episode description.